So one of my favourite things to read about online is cancelled games, and in this video I've found 7 for the Game Boy Advance where the developers have actually uploaded the ROMs online so you can actually play the games using an EverDrive on the actual GBA console. I am so excited to show you what I've found in this week's video, brought to you by Bifrost Bridge Studios. They've just launched a new tier on their Patreon for $50 or £38, and for that price you get to have a cameo in their story, Gaia's Seed. So if you're interested in what they're working on and if you want to have a part in the story, definitely go and check out their Patreon, there's a link in the description. So with that said, let's take a look at 7 unreleased games for the GBA playable on an EverDrive. Let's get started. So the first game we're looking at is actually an unreleased game in the Battletoads series. This one was really interesting to see. It was cancelled very early in development. The playable build that I've got here was uploaded online and it features a few different levels, as well as some extra hidden content in the ROM which was uploaded to the Cutting Room Floor, one of my favourite websites. As you can see from this gameplay, it all looks very generic. And that's because these were all placeholder graphics, which were using the first ideas for a reboot of the Battletoads series, which was also going to come out on the Xbox around the same time, which was also cancelled. From looking through these files, you can see what else was planned for the game at this very early stage. They recreated a level resembling the NES original, and there was also a block out for another stage as well, which never saw the light of day. Most interestingly though, there was also a 3D Mode 7 stage, which actually used part of a course from the next unreleased game we're going to look at, which was Diddy Kong Pilot. Apparently, the team at the time were actually relieved that the game got cancelled, as they weren't expecting much support from Nintendo after they were bought out by Microsoft. So I hope you enjoyed having a look at this very early version of Battletoads for the GBA. Now let's move on to the second game, which was Diddy Kong Pilot. So you might know there was a game for the GBA called Banjo Pilot, which came out in 2005, but what you may not know is the fact that the game actually began all the way back in the year 2000, where it was first shown off at Space World that year, and it was actually going to be a follow-up to the N64 game Diddy Kong Racing. So there's 3 different versions of this game uploaded online. There was an early version from 2001, which unfortunately I couldn't get working on the EverDrive. There was also another version from 2003, which is the one that you're seeing right now, and there was actually a voxel based version made as well, which was what the game might have been before they went back to the Mode 7 style. So sure, it looks blocky and the frame rate isn't amazing, but seeing this run on the actual system through an EverDrive really is a sight to behold. Just look how nice this runs on the actual system. It would have been so impressive back in the day to get a game that looked like this on the GBA. It really does look like a true follow-up to the N64 game. But unfortunately, Rare ran into a lot of problems trying to get this engine up and running, so instead the final game actually goes back to the original style of the first 2 prototypes. The final game is still good, but it's nowhere near as impressive as what could have been. Now next is a game called The Haunted Mansion. This one is another really impressive game that never got to see the light of day. Apparently this one's based on a Disney movie, which was actually based on a Disney ride from the theme parks. As you can see, the developers really tried to get a fully 3D environment working on the GBA, and aside from some odd camera movement and some awkward controls, I'd say they actually pulled it off pretty well. Unfortunately though, from what you can play of this build of the game, it isn't really very fun at all, so honestly it's not much of a loss that this one ended up being cancelled, but it is a really cool technical showpiece for the system. While I was looking up some information about this game, I actually found a comment on a YouTube video from the creator of the game, and he stated the main reason for its non-release was that TDK, the original publishers, being bought out mid-development by Take-Two. I'm certainly not in the know as to what went on between Take-Two and Pocket, but after the takeover it was clear that the game wouldn't get a release. So what do you think from what you've seen of this game so far? Would you have liked it to see a release? Did you ever see the movie that it was based on? Let me know in the comments. Now for the next game, and a really interesting one. This is called Western Lord. Now, Western Lord is a cancelled RPG with a really unique setting. It was going to be set in the Old West, and there was 3 different ROMs out there online. The first of which is a simple fighting tech demo, but I couldn't really get very far in that one. The next one shows off some really nice artwork in this intro, and the final one actually lets you walk around in what I presume would have been the starting town. You can interact with a few of the NPCs here, but there's not much else to do though, unfortunately. One really cool thing that I did find while researching for this one is the developers have a Discord channel. I joined it and had a good chat on there with the developer about the game and some of his other projects as well. They're even thinking of the possibility of bringing this game back and working on a version for the Switch. So if that's something you'd be interested in, or if you want to check out some of the history behind the game and some of the files that the developer found, I'll put a link to the Discord in the description below. He's also uploaded some high quality artwork on there as well as some of the music that would have found its way into the full game. Now next up is a game called Broken Circle, and this one has a kind of sad story behind it. Now the reason this game got made in the first place was that back in 2004, an artist called Elvis Morelli won a competition to make a game and have it published. Of course he was an artist, but he had no programming skills of his own, so he enlisted the help of a company called Seven Ravens. They actually worked on the game almost up until completion, but unfortunately, right at the last minute the publisher decided to back out, leaving Elvis and his team without a way to actually release the game. A few years later, in 2007, Seven Ravens decided to release the ROM online for free for anyone who was interested in trying it out. A few years after that, Pico Interactive, the same company that re-released Tyrannosaurus Tex that I did a video on a few months ago, actually picked up the license for the ROM, finished off the development and released it as a physical release. Unfortunately, there's no way of actually buying that these days, so at least this one kind of got a happy ending, even though it didn't seem to have that much of a print run. If Pico Interactive's watching this video, please do another re-release because I would love to buy this game off you. Now this next game, called A World Reborn, is another similar story that was also picked up by Pico Interactive, but unfortunately is once again no longer available to buy online. This one is a shoot 'em up that began life in the early 2000s as the company Neopong's first game. The game's a mix of a shoot 'em up and an RPG, which was very unique for the time. It was actually several years before Sigma Star Soldier, which is the shooter/RPG that you probably know of on the GBA. The company unfortunately once again had difficulties with the publisher after a few restructures, which unfortunately caused them to cancel the game and instead focus on licensed properties instead, including Hannah Montana, Barbie and Nancy Drew, so I feel really sorry for this developer. They obviously had so much talent and they were so excited and passionate about making their own unique game, which fell through. In 2008, the company thankfully decided to release the ROM online along with a really detailed blog post in which they also stated they had plans for a DS sequel, which also sadly never saw the light of day. Like I said, Pico picked up the ROM in around 2015 and released it physically, but unfortunately it's no longer available. And I think saving the best till last, this one is really interesting, so thank you everyone who stuck around until now. Now let me tell you about a game called Blue Angelo, Angels from the Shrine. It's basically a Metroid-style action-adventure game with two different ROMs available. They're both quite early in development for the GBA. The first one is more playable and has actual enemies that can take damage, but the second ROM has a lot more graphical effects, but it has a few glitches with the enemies. What makes this game in particular so fascinating for me is not the fact that it was a Metroidvania or the fact that the graphics and the gameplay looked really promising, but it's the fact that this game actually did get a full release on the Game Park GP32, which was a South Korean competitor to the Game Boy, which came out in the early 2000s. I had a look on eBay and I was amazed to see that one actually sold a few weeks ago. The GP32 doesn't actually have a working emulator at the time of recording this video, and the game only had about 500 copies made in Europe. So it's not only one of the rarest games of all time, but it's actually extremely difficult to actually play for yourself as well. So it's such a shame that this game never got a release on the GBA, because from what I've seen and from what I've heard of the GP32 game, it is a really good Metroidvania style adventure. There was plans for a Kickstarter recently to re-release the game on PC with all new graphics, but unfortunately it didn't pan out and now the Kickstarter's offline, but I did find this trailer that was released on YouTube. So maybe Blue Angelo will make a comeback, and I would love at some point to be able to track down the GP32 version and do a video on it on here so you guys can see what the game could have been on the GBA. It does look really, really promising. I'm also thinking about doing some homebrew videos for GBA games as well, so let me know down in the comments what homebrew games you'd like to see me cover on the channel, and I will definitely get round to doing one of those in the future. There's actually a GBA homebrew game that's coming up on Kickstarter very soon called Good Boy Galaxy, and I was given a preview to show off in this video, so have a look at this and see what you think. Check the links in the description if you want to go and back it. So from just my brief time with the game, I have to say it looks really, really promising, and I will definitely be backing it as soon as it becomes available on Kickstarter. It's actually up today on the 27th, so if you're watching this the day the video goes live, check the link in the description, and if you like what you see here, go and check out the Kickstarter. I'll definitely be backing it myself, and thank you so much to the developer for giving me an early version of the game to show off in this video, and hopefully bring some more people over too. Thank you so much to Callum George and Matthew Corcoran for becoming my most recent Patreon supporters. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next week for the next video. Goodbye.